I never thought my husband would turn our home into a free motel for his family. But when they marched in, dragging their suitcases across my floors like they owned the place, I turned to Mark, my voice shaking. What is this? Why didn't we talk about this first? He just smirked, his arm draped casually around his sister's shoulder. They're family, Jennifer. This is what family does. Not once had he asked what I wanted. Not once did he care. Mark and I had been married for 2 years, living in a beautiful townhouse I had rented long before we even met. It was my sanctuary, my safe space. When we got married, it seemed natural for him to move in with me. I worked as an assistant editor-in-chief at a major publishing house, managing my career from home. It gave me flexibility and allowed me to create a peaceful environment where I could thrive. Or at least, that's what I thought. Mark was charming, funny, and full of grand ideas about what our future should look like. And in his mind, that future always revolved around family, his family. I should have seen the red flags when he constantly talked about how much his parents would love our home, how great it would be to have real family gatherings under our roof. But I ignored it, thinking he was just sentimental. The first time my life was invaded, it was by his sister Sarah and her 2 kids. They arrived unannounced, standing on my doorstep with their suitcases and bright smiles, ready to move in. Surprise! Sarah beamed, pushing past me before I could even process what was happening. The kids need a little male influence, plus it's just for the school holidays. Mark was thrilled. Isn't this great, Jen? He asked, already carrying their bags upstairs. The kids can stay in the guest room and Sarah can take the office. I blinked. The office? But that's where I work. You can work anywhere, honey, he said dismissively, already making decisions without me. That was the beginning of the end. The next few weeks were hell. Sarah's kids were little demons in disguise. They tracked mud into the house, left sticky handprints on the walls, and treated me like their personal maid. Hey, stupid lady, Tommy, the older one, yelled at me over breakfast. I want pancakes. I tried to keep my voice calm. Tommy, we don't call people names, and first wash your hands. Whatever, dummy, his younger sister Lisa chimed in, deliberately spilling her juice onto the floor. Mom says we don't have to listen to you. You're not real family. I looked at Sarah, expecting her to correct them. Instead, she scrolled through her phone, barely looking up. Kids will be kids, she said with a shrug. You just have to be firm with them. Firm? They weren't my children. They weren't my responsibility. But Mark expected me to take care of them like some kind of unpaid babysitter. One morning, I was scrambling to meet an urgent deadline when Sarah barged into my makeshift workspace in the living room. The kids need lunch, she announced like I was her personal chef. Something organic, sugar-free, and gluten-free, of course. Sarah, I'm in the middle of work, I started, but she cut me off with a laugh. Oh, please, you just sit at home all day typing. That's not real work, unlike being a mother. I clenched my fists under the table. Mark was no help. He acted like I was overreacting every time I brought up how exhausted I was. They're family, Jen, he kept repeating. You need to be more understanding, but family doesn't treat you like a servant. When Sarah and the kids finally left, I thought I could breathe again. I sat Mark down for a serious conversation. Mark, that was too much. Your sister and her kids completely disrespected me. I couldn't get any work done, and I felt like a maid in my own house. Please, promise me you'll discuss these things with me first. He sighed dramatically like I was being unreasonable. Fine, I promise. Next time we'll talk first. I believed him, like an idiot. 6 months later, I was catching up on work when I heard Mark on the phone in the kitchen. Of course, Mom. You and Dad can stay as long as you need. We have plenty of room. My stomach dropped. I rushed to the kitchen just as he hung up. Mark, I whispered urgently, what did you just do? Mom and Dad's house is getting some plumbing work done, he said casually. It's no big deal, Jen. They just need a place to stay for a few weeks. I felt like screaming. You promised me we'd discuss this first. His face hardened. What do you want me to do, Jen? Leave my parents without a place to stay? Stop being so selfish. Selfish. That word again. The same word he used whenever I dared to put my own needs first. The next morning, my in-laws arrived, and within hours, my home was no longer my own. Linda, my mother-in-law, took over the kitchen, rearranging everything as if she owned the place. Jennifer, dear, she said in that syrupy sweet voice that dripped with condescension, when you're done playing on your little computer, we'll need dinner. Something hearty, not those silly salads you make. I gritted my teeth. Linda, I'm actually working right now. I have deadlines, she laughed. Working? Sitting at home isn't work, dear. You need to focus more on being a proper wife. Proper wife. Mark, of course, did nothing. Just try to get along with them, Jen, he said dismissively when I brought it up. They're family. One night I sat beside him in bed feeling like a stranger in my own life. Mark, I need you to back me up here. I can't do everything on my own. He nodded. You're right. I should take some time off. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful. Really? Yeah, he grinned. Dad and I are going on a fishing trip for a week, some real father-son bonding time. I stared at him, my hands shaking. That's not what I meant. But he was already packing his bag, leaving me alone to deal with his mother's criticism and his father's mess. And that's when I realized something. Mark didn't see me as his partner. He saw me as his possession, his housekeeper, his cook, his emotional punching bag, and I was done. Mark left for his fishing trip the next morning, whistling as he walked out the door. I stood by the kitchen sink, gripping the counter so hard my fingers ached. He was leaving me here, alone, with his mother, his father, and a house that wasn't mine anymore. The first few days were unbearable. Linda treated me like a personal maid, giving me lists of chores as if it were my duty to keep the house spotless. Bob sat in front of the TV all day, shouting at the screen while leaving dirty dishes everywhere. I tried to retreat to my office, my only safe space, but it had been turned into a laundry room. You don't need that desk, Linda had said, shoving baskets of clothes onto it. You can work from anywhere, dear. A good wife multitasks. A good wife. That phrase had started haunting me. Then, on the third night, I woke up to the sound of Sarah's voice. My heart dropped into my stomach. No, I walked out of the guest bedroom, the one Mark had forced me to move into, and found her dragging in her luggage with Tommy and Lisa running wild around the living room. Surprise! She beamed, tossing her purse onto the couch. The kids missed their grandparents, and Mark said we're always welcome. Mark, he had planned this. Before I could even process my rage, Linda wrapped Sarah in a hug. Oh, darling, of course you belong here. And just like that, my nightmare doubled. The next morning, I tried to talk to Sarah to set boundaries. Sarah, I work from home. I need space and quiet to do my job. She laughed in my face. Oh, come on. Your little typing hobby? That's not real work. Besides, family comes first. Linda, standing behind her, nodded. She's right, Jennifer. You need to learn to be more accommodating. A real wife puts her family's needs first. A real wife. That day, Tommy threw a tantrum and smeared peanut butter all over my laptop screen. Lisa drew with crayons on the walls, and Sarah just shrugged. Kids will be kids. That night, as I lay in my cramped guest bed, listening to Linda's voice criticizing me from the other room, I realized something. I was done being their servant. I had to get out. The next morning, I woke up with one goal, to leave. I couldn't reason with Mark. I couldn't convince him to choose me over them. The truth was, he never would. So I had to choose myself. I waited until everyone was distracted, Sarah yelling at the kids, Linda reorganizing my kitchen again, and went into my former office. I needed my laptop, my documents, and a few important things before I left for good. When I stepped inside, I froze. Linda was sitting at my desk, reading through my work emails. What are you doing? I asked, my voice tight with rage. She barely glanced up. Oh, Jennifer, dear. Mark asked me to help manage things while you're busy with, well, whatever it is you do. You shouldn't keep secrets from your husband, you know. Secrets? I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. That's my work. You have no right. She sighed dramatically and shook her head. No wonder Mark is so frustrated with you. You've got everything backwards. A wife shouldn't prioritize her career over her family. Maybe if you were more grateful, none of this would be an issue. That was it. That was the moment I snapped. I turned around and walked straight out of the room. I went to the guest bedroom, shoved my essentials into a suitcase, and grabbed my laptop from Linda's grasp as I passed her. Where do you think you're going? Linda called after me. Anywhere but here, I said without turning back. I walked out the front door. Nobody followed me. Nobody cared. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I got in my car and drove away, leaving behind a house that had never truly been mine. And I didn't look back. Leaving that house felt like the first real breath of fresh air I'd had in years. But the moment I checked into a small hotel across town, reality hit me. I had no plan, no idea what to do next, only a desperate need to never go back. I stared at my phone. Not a single call or message from Mark. He hadn't even noticed I was gone, until 3 days later. The moment I turned my phone back on, it exploded with missed calls. Mark, Linda, even Sarah. I braced myself and picked up when Mark called again. Where the hell are you? He demanded. I come home and the house is a mess. The kids are out of control and Mom is furious. How could you just leave like that? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Oh, you noticed. I figured since my little job wasn't real work, nobody would miss me. Jen, stop being dramatic. His voice lowered to that condescending tone I hated. Look, just come home. We'll fix this. There is no we anymore, Mark. Silence. Then a cruel chuckle. Where else are you going to go? You need me, Jen. You're nothing without me. I hung up. That night, I started looking for apartments. Over the next few days, the messages turned from anger to desperation. First, Mark called me selfish. Then he started apologizing, then pleading. Baby, I overreacted, one voicemail said. You know I didn't mean any of it. Just come home, okay? We can talk. The next day, Jen, this is ridiculous. The kids are destroying the house. Mom won't stop nagging me. I can't do this alone. A week later, I miss you. Please, I made a mistake. But I never answered. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. I found a small one-bedroom apartment, perfect for just me. My boss even offered me a promotion. Turns out, my work wasn't useless after all. Then, one afternoon, my old landlord called. Jennifer, I wanted to give you a heads up, Mr. Peterson said. I'm evicting your husband. The neighbors have been complaining about parties, kids running wild, and per the lease, no unauthorized residents. I grinned. I appreciate the update, but I don't live there anymore. I hung up, feeling lighter than ever. A week passed, then two. I settled into my new life, one where I didn't have to tiptoe around Mark's moods, cook for ungrateful in-laws, or pretend to be happy while my dreams were crushed. Then, Mark called, desperate. They kicked me out, Jen. He was practically sobbing. I have nowhere to go. Mom and Dad won't take me in. Sarah won't even let me crash on her couch. For the first time, he was alone, and he couldn't handle it. You should call your real family, I said. Oh, wait, that's right. They used you and threw you away. Please, he begged. I don't have anywhere else. I lost everything. His voice cracked, and for a brief second I felt something close to pity. But then I remembered. I remembered every night I cried myself to sleep, every insult, every time he dismissed me, belittled me, treated me like nothing. And suddenly, I didn't feel sorry for him at all. You lost everything, Mark, I said quietly, because of you. Silence. He sniffed. I just thought you'd always be there. I sighed. So did I, but I was wrong. I hung up, but it didn't end there. A few days later, Mark showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there, disheveled, looking nothing like the confident man I had once married. His suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven, and there was a frantic look in his eyes. Jen, please, just hear me out, he said, his voice cracking. I know I messed up. I see it now. I was awful to you, and I let my family ruin everything, but I need you. I love you. We can start over. I stared at him, my heart pounding, not out of love, but out of anger. How dare he? No, Mark, you don't love me. You love control. You love having someone to clean up your messes and cater to your every need, and I'm done being that person. But I can change, he insisted, stepping closer. I swear, Jen, I'll prove it. Just give me another chance. I took a deep breath. You had a chance, Mark. You had so many chances, and you threw them all away. Tears welled in his eyes, and for a moment I saw true fear. He wasn't just losing me. He was realizing that nobody was coming to save him. Where am I supposed to go? He whispered. I shrugged. That's not my problem anymore. I closed the door in his face, and this time I felt nothing but relief. For the first time in years, I was truly free. The weeks after closing the door on Mark felt surreal. At first, I kept expecting him to show up again, to call, to beg, but the silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard, and I loved it. I settled into my new apartment, embracing the peace that had once felt impossible. Mornings were no longer filled with demands, criticisms, or chaos. I drank my coffee in silence without Sarah's kids screaming, without Linda peering over my shoulder. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. Then my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I'm sorry. I didn't need to ask who it was. I didn't need to respond. I deleted it without hesitation and stepped forward into the next chapter of my life, one where I was finally, truly free